What's going on, everybody? Today is Thursday, June 17th, and this is episode 13 of the Rome Bracy Sports Show. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell so that you don't miss another show. Please support this podcast by following the link in the description or by clicking support on Anchor. Listen to audio-only versions of the podcast by searching my name, Lamelo Bracy, on Apple and Spotify. So getting right into the question of the day, we have, after the Hawks winning in Game 5 last night, do you think they will win the series? Well, first off, let me just talk about the game last night between the Hawks and 76ers. It was one of the most epic comebacks in NBA history, so it was one of the most entertaining games that I've seen. And, you know, the Hawks did end up coming out with the victory, now leading the series 3-2, but it's hard for me to pick them to win the series. The 76ers are so dominant, and they, like I said, they were up by 26. I think they're pretty clearly the better team, but they just need to have Ben Simmons. Tobias Harris even had like a terrible night from the field. So I don't see the Hawks winning this series, and actually I'm going to take the 76ers to come back in Game 6 and Game 7 to close this thing out. On this day in history of June 17th, 2012, Hall of Fame running back LaDainian Tomlinson did sign a one-day contract to retire a San Diego Charger in 2012. He played 9 seasons of his 11 NFL seasons with the San Diego Chargers, and he was actually named 2006 AP NFL MVP and set the single-season NFL rushing record for touchdowns and scrimmage touchdowns with 28 rushing touchdowns and 31 total scrimmage touchdowns. He was a 5-time Pro Bowl selection and 3-time first-team All-Pro with the Chargers. There's no doubt that LT is one of the greatest running backs of all time, and I got to watch him in his prime, and he was truly one of the first do-it-all backs. He was one of the better receiving backs in the league, which is why he broke that scrimmage touchdown record, and he could run for 200 yards a game, and he would get 20 to 25 carries. So one of the real bell cows of the NFL, and his 13,684 rushing yards is 7th most in NFL history. He had 145 rushing TDs, which is the 2nd most in NFL history, 18,456 scrimmage yards, which is the 6th most in NFL history, and 162 scrimmage touchdowns, which is the 3rd most in NFL history. So he can arguably be a top 5, position player out there in the NFL history. So LT, shout out to you. On this day in 2012, he did sign and retire with the San Diego Chargers. The Hawks were able to rally back, being down 26 points heading into the 3rd quarter, and they end up winning this game in Philadelphia 109-106. And it was one of the greatest comebacks in NBA playoff history. Trae Young, Lou Williams, Danilo Gallinari, they all kind of contributed to come back and win this game for the Hawks. But I've talked about this before. The Hawks have a lot of offensive weapons, and not too long ago, Lou Williams was dropping 50 in the playoffs. So I think Lou Williams is someone that should get more minutes. He is more of a liability on the defensive end, but he's someone who needs to be worked more into the rotation. Trae Young, of course, did his thing, scoring 39 points, and Joel Embiid had 17 points in the 1st quarter and started off 8 for 8. So he was coming off of a bad shooting performance the game before. He came out and looked incredible. And at the end of 3, Philly led 87-69 still, leading by 18 going into the 4th quarter. But the real problem here to me was Ben Simmons. He was 4 for 14 from the free throw line, and as a point guard, you can't be targeted to foul at the end of the games. He had 4 for 14. I would foul him too. He can't make his free throws, and Ben Simmons might not be able to shoot a 3, but he needs to learn at least how to make free throws. 4 for 14 is inexcusable, and ultimately, missing 10 free throws will cost your team the game. Gallinari scored 16 points, Lou Williams had 15 with his 12 in the 4th quarter, and John Collins had 19 points and 11 rebounds. So it was a total team effort by the Hawks. They never stopped in this one, never gave up, even though Philly was up by 26, which is really good for the Hawks. I think, they have a chance to close out this series. I did pick the 76ers to ultimately move on, but I would not be surprised at all if the Atlanta Hawks are going to the Eastern Conference Finals. And if you're an Atlanta Hawks fan, you should be thrilled because I don't think anyone saw them going this deep in the playoffs. And their roster is still so young, it's going to be hard to keep that together for years moving forward. But you have Trae Young and you have a lot of other pieces. We'll see how this Atlanta Hawks team can advance in the playoffs and maybe even make a finals run. There was another game last night, though, that was just as exciting, and that was the Los Angeles Clippers and the Utah Jazz. This one was more competitive the entire game, but the Clippers end up winning this one 119 to 111. Paul George stepped up big time, and I couldn't be more excited for this guy. The amount of slander that he received last year in the bubble was a little obnoxious to me. I understand he did choke, but I think if you've watched Paul George his whole career, you know what type of player he is. And he showed up big time in a big moment in the playoffs where Kawhi Leonard was out, and he saw the opportunity to change the narrative on who he could be. And I think he really took advantage of that, scoring 37 points, coming up with 16 rebounds and 5 assists. Paul George did everything the Clippers needed and much more for them to get this victory. And the job is clearly not done, though. They're up 3-2. If the Jazz come back and end up winning this series, Paul George slander is right back. So he needs to finish this series out. He needs another 30-point game, which he's had 4 in a row now against the Utah Jazz. But he also had support from Marcus Morris, who added 25 points, and that's back-to-back games for Marcus with 25-plus points. I haven't seen him score this well his entire career, and when you watch him, his fadeaway from the mid-range for some reason is absolute butter, and he's been hitting everything. And Reggie Jackson also has been hot. He has 22 points. If Paul George is going to go along with 2 other players scoring 20, I think the Clippers are going to be just fine. In the very early stages of this game, though, it was incredible the amount of shooting Bojan Bogdanovic was doing. He hit 6 first quarter threes and could not miss, but he ended up with 32, Donovan Mitchell with 21, and to be honest with you, Donovan Mitchell does not look healthy, which is very concerning if you're a Utah Jazz fan. This is because I'm assuming it's the ankle injury, but it does not look good out there for him. If you're a Jazz fan, it's just like every other playoff team. Injuries are hurting your team. Mike Conley has been out for 5 straight games. Donovan Mitchell is limping. And it's going to be the most healthy teams that end up in the finals. So we will see if the Jazz are able to even up the series in Game 6. But like I said, the Jazz started hot, making a franchise record 10 threes in the first quarter. And I knew they were kind of in trouble because they couldn't miss, but they only led by 5 points at the end of one, and the Clippers end up stealing this one. We will see if they can close out the series on Friday. Yesterday, Lamelo Ball was announced the NBA Rookie of the Year. He beat out Anthony Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton, and he did so averaging 15.7 points, 5.9 rebounds, and 6.1 assists per game, as well as 1.6 steals per game. So he could kind of do everything for the Charlotte Hornets. I think he ends up winning this award ultimately because no one knew what he was going to be like in the NBA. I don't think people really thought he would come in and produce the way that he did, but he's a lot different than his brother. I think he's way more skilled offensively, and I couldn't be more excited for Lamelo to continue his career. I think the Hornets was a perfect landing spot for him. The Hornets haven't been relevant or haven't been watched in years, and now that Lamelo's on the team, you always want to watch him. So I think that's a really good thing for Lamelo. He did miss 21 games with a fractured wrist and still ends up coming away with Rookie of the Year. Some would say that Anthony Edwards did get snubbed, and I could see that. I think Halliburton also had a real chance. It was a close and tight race. I think it was fine whoever got the award. He made an immediate impact with the Hornets, though, and ends up taking them ultimately to the playoffs, or the play-in game at least. They don't win any games in that, but they're on their way to being a better team. And he actually became the youngest player in NBA history this season to record a triple-double with 22 points, 12 rebounds, and 11 assists in just his 10th career game against the Atlanta Hawks. So pretty impressive. We knew right from the jump that Lamelo had the experience, and it wasn't much of an adjustment for him. So shout out to Lamelo for winning that award. Tyrese Halliburton averaged 13 points, 5.3 assists, and he shot over 40% from 3. So he ends up being much better than the 12th overall pick that he was. Tyrese Halliburton is definitely going to be someone who can who can score for you moving forward, and he makes nice passes. So we'll see how he does in Sacramento. And like I said, he could make the case for Anthony Edwards. He averaged 23.8 points per game after the All-Star break. But I watched Anthony Edwards, and he's really exciting. He can dunk on anybody pretty much, and he has a nice three-point shot, but he does take a ton of shots for me. I think if you look at those game logs, he's taken over 20 shots quite a bit, and I think he can become a little bit more efficient. But Lamelo Ball is your NBA Rookie of the Year for 2021. We have a pivotal Game 6 tonight between the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks. Brooklyn now leads this series 3-2 after Kevin Durant's monster Game 5 performance. Harden is going to play in this game, but no Kyrie Irving. It's going to be interesting to see if Harden can do a little bit more for them this time. His last game, he did shoot 1 for 10 from the field, missing all 8 of his threes. So we'll see if he looks better out there. He looked like he was pretty much playing on one leg last game. So we'll see if maybe Milwaukee can actually take advantage of that. But this is a matchup where the home team has won every single game. The series does return to Milwaukee, where the Bucks recorded their 2 victories, 86-83 and 107-96 last week. And I'm going to predict the same. I think the Bucks and I'm going to say the same. I think that the Bucks do get a victory in this Game 6 to make it 3-3 and go to Game 7. I think that Kevin Durant is going to ball out and score his 40 points probably, but the Bucks need to take advantage of Harden being out there and no Kyrie. So I think the Bucks do win this game in Game 6, and it's 3-3 heading back to Brooklyn. So Chicago Bears coach Matt Nagy reiterated that Andy Dalton is going to be their starter week 1 of the 2021 NFL season. And I just don't understand why you would try and name your starter this early. Minicamp just started, and you want to give Justin Fields, I would think, a push to want to try and compete for that first job. I know he doesn't need it, but I think this is just Nagy trying to stay consistent with his narrative with Andy Dalton that he's going to be the starter. I think that's why Andy ultimately signed with the Bears. Matt Nagy promised that he would start week 1 or just be the starter. And I think if Andy Dalton is going to be the starter week 1, there's a scenario where he plays just good enough that you can't sit him, or you're gonna have Justin Fields just waiting back there. I don't think saying he's the starter for week 1 right now is beneficial to the team at all. You want to put your best player out there, and I don't think you fully evaluated Justin Fields to say that Andy Dalton is a better quarterback than him. So this is interesting to me. I don't like it, but it lines right up with the Chicago Bears. In other news, Drew Brees did attend the Chargers training camp. Sorry, not training camp. The Chargers mini camp, just to with his new job with NBC in his new analyst role. And he talked about Justin Herbert a little bit, saying by all accounts he's a great worker. He's got great leadership qualities. He's got a lot of intangibles. So I think the sky's the limit for a guy like him. And Drew Brees is one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. Praising Justin Herbert just like everybody else. I think Justin Herbert is, even after the year that he had, he's still a little bit underrated. He's in a division that's loaded with quarterbacks. I think he's better than Derek Carr. Definitely not better than Patrick Mahomes, but he's on his way to being an elite NFL quarterback, and I'm really excited to see that second-year step that he takes in 2021. They did add Jared Cook to go along with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who could have a big year. I love Mike Williams, the player. It really upsets me that he hasn't been able to stay healthy enough to be consistent. But Justin Herbert's 31 touchdown passes, 396 completions, and 8 300-yard games last year were all NFL rookie records. So Justin Herbert is on his way to have an NFL Hall of Fame career if he keeps those numbers up. And he's 6'6", 240. He's a big target, and he's mobile. And he also won the Offensive Rookie of the Year. So sky is the limit for Justin Herbert. I know he has a big arm, and he's going to do big things with the Chargers this year. They're one of my sleepers, and I really like the Chargers in the 2021 season. Lamar Jackson and his Baltimore Ravens offense are also trying to make some changes this year, and mainly focusing on the deep ball. And that's because he hasn't really had any deep ball targets besides Marquise Brown, who's standing at 5'9". They haven't really taken too many deep shots, and even in his MVP season, he completed 17 of his 50 passes that are 20 plus yards for only 584 yards and 8 touchdowns while throwing 2 interceptions. So in an MVP season, those numbers should be way up. And in 2020, they looked even worse, where he went 16 of 46 on such throws for 539 yards and 5 TDs to go along with 3 picks. So this Baltimore offense is going to need to add another dimension to their game, whether it be, the deep ball or passing the ball more than 20 times a game. But they're going to need to be more efficient throwing the ball. Lamar knows it. John Harbaugh knows it. And I think this Ravens team makes the proper adjustments and becomes one of the best teams in the AFC for the 2021 NFL season. That's going to do it for today's show, though. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you have yet to subscribe to the podcast, please do so by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts are available. And please don't forget to follow me on Twitter at RomeloB_sports.
TakeTones.com.